salient features. And also we have discussed about parliament, its composition, powers and duties of parliament also. And also we are discussed about President of India, his election, his removal, his tenure, and his powers, including emergency powers, we are discussed in previous class. So here we are having syllabus regarding union executive and judiciary. In this chapter, we are having prime minister and council of ministers, and also judiciary. So here uh, you you know prime minister is the actual head of our state. So nominal head of the state is president of India. Here real head, real executive head of the India is prime minister of India. So here we are having this portfolio system. We adopted this prime minister and parliamentary form of system from the British Constitution, and also we introduced before adopting Constitution. Also, we are adopted this type of parliamentary form of government. So, just a second. Right. So, as we discussed in previous classes, the definition of parliament is about the inclusion of President of India, Lok Sabha, and the Rajya Sabha. That what we called it as parliament. So, in our parliamentary form of government, here executives and legislature also included in this parliamentary system. So the president, vice president, council of ministers led by the prime minister of India, and attorney general also mentioned in this legislature procedure, because he is the legal advisor to the union government, because the government should follow the constitutional rules. So he has power to verify and check the orders passed by the legislature, whether it is following Constitution of India or not. So that's what attorney general is there for, to review the acts and orders passed by the parliament. So, and also in every state, advocate general also there for this type of function, to do to review the acts and legislature procedures followed by the state legislative assemblies. So here Article 74 of the Constitution of India provides that there shall be a council of ministers headed by the Prime Minister of India, and also these council of ministers and Prime Minister, these people advise the president, who shall in the exercise his functions act in accordance with such advice. As we discussed president's powers, so he shall appoint to so many executive posts, and he can remove. But here the original power is after the advice of these council of ministers and prime minister, he exercises powers. So that's what the original executive head of the government is, prime minister of India. So here the council of ministers is made up of the prime minister and other ministers, cabinet ministers, ministers of state, and deputy ministers. Here, three types of ministers are there. So the council of ministers divided into three categories. So one is cabinet ministers, second one is ministers of state, and third one is deputy ministers. So if we see the Indian Constitution borrowed this parliamentary form of government from the British Constitution. As we discussed, the real executive of the Indian Union is the Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister. So, which actually exercise these powers and the whole executive authority theoretically vested by the Constitution of India is in the name of President. But the original powers exercised by this Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister of India. So the system already started before the independence to the India at the time of implementation of Indian Councils Act 1861. So after the implementation of Constitution of India, we have provided constitutional provisions regarding this type of parliamentary system. So here Article 74 says Council of Ministers to aid and advise President. So here this clause, this article, there shall be, according to this 74th article of the Constitution of India, there shall be a Council of Ministers with the Prime Minister at the head of this Council of Ministers to aid and advise the President, who shall, in the exercise of his functions, and act in accordance with such advice by this Council of Ministers. So sometimes this advice was tendered by the ministers to be to the President of India shall not be inquired into any court. So Article 75 of the Constitution says that the Prime Minister shall be appointed by the President and all the other ministers shall be appointed by the President on the advice of the Prime Minister. If we see, these ministers and Prime Ministers are appointed by the President of India according to the Constitution of India.
Yes. Excuse me, sir. Sorry to say, like, sir, please say the block number and page number.
So I am explaining the topic, not regarding about your textbook. So after the ending of class, you may refer your textbook.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. So, so if we see, according to the Article 75, the total number of ministers, including the Prime Minister, the Council of Ministers shall not exceed 15% of total number of members in the House of the People, which means Lok Sabha. So the ministers hold office during the pleasure of the President, because after the general elections, after getting majority by one party or coalition parties, so the President may call to form this government, and after the appointment of Prime Minister of India, he may suggest his party members to act as ministers. So as we discussed, there are three categories divided as ministers. So these number of ministers, according to the Constitution, shall not exceed 15% of the total number of members in the Lok Sabha. So before a minister takes over the his office, President administers to him the oath of the office and secrecy according in the forms of set out for the purpose in the third schedule of the Constitution of India. So the salaries and allowances of ministers are such as the Parliament may from time to time determined by any law. So until Parliament so determines, shall be specified in the second schedule of the Constitution of India. So here the qualification of minister, what will be the qualification of the minister is, he should be member in the either Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. So in case of he is not elected for any house of the Parliament, he may continue his powers until maximum period of time is 6 months. So within that 6 months period, he has to be elected for any house of the parliament, which means Lok Sabha, or he should be elected for the Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. So here I have power problem. So am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Oh, oh, okay, fine. So, so if a minister is not a member of in any house of the parliament, he should be elected within the maximum period of 6 months. He should be elected for the in any house of the parliament. So before that, a minister who for any period of the 6 consecutive months is not a member either house of parliament shall at the expiration of the period ceases to be a minister. So uh, uh, if we see the formation of council of ministers, the total procedure of this formation of council of ministers begins with the appointment of the prime minister by the president of India. So while appointing this prime minister, the president will have little opportunity to exercise his own discretion. So he will have to be the leader of the majority party, which secures a majority in the Lok Sabha when the general elections conducted. So only when none of the parties represented in Lok Sabha commands a clear majority, the president may have some discretion within the bonds of conventions. At that time, the coalition governments will form the government. So the section of other ministers in practice is entirely the discretion of the prime minister. So the president has to simply accept the recommendations of the prime minister. So here the prime minister is has the power to select other ministers. So the president has to accept the team chosen by the prime minister. So which means he is a member of Lok Sabha or he should be the Rajya Sabha. So if a person who is not a member of so so okay. So, as we see, the qualification of the Council of Minister is he should be a member of in any house of the parliament. So, if we see the disqualification of this Council of Minister due to defection, or also if a member of parliament has been disqualified on the ground of defection, he would not be eligible to become a minister. So, but if he again gets elected in the next freshly held parliamentary election, then he will be eligible to be become a minister. So if you see the strength of Council of Ministers, the size and classification are not mentioned in the Constitution of India. Its size is determined by the Prime Minister. So according to the 91st Constitutional Amendment Act 2003, it should not exceed 15% of the total strength of the Lok Sabha. So the term of the office of Council of Ministers is it's only depends upon president's discretionary powers. So here original tenure is the maximum duration of which a minister can be in the office is 5 years or one complete Lok Sabha term. So if even if the same party that won a majority in next elections returns with a majority, a new cabinet must be formed after each general election to the Lok Sabha. So as we discussed the categories of ministers, the different ranks of the ministers are classified. So the constitution does not classify these council of ministers into different ranks, but here informally following British practice, that is one is cabinet minister, and here cabinet ministers means those who are experienced, who hold very important portfolios like home affairs, defense, finance, agriculture, foreign affairs, etc. These categories are classified in these cabinet ministers. So their number varies from the time to time, but it is generally in the range of around 15 to 20 cabinet ministers will be there in our union government. So a cabinet minister always heads a ministry and is given independent charge of its portfolio. So unless he is appointed by minister without portfolio, so he attends the meeting of Council of Ministers or cabinet on his own right, and is generally assisted by a minister of state or a deputy minister or both. So minister of state means he may be given independent charge of a ministry. He cannot attend the meetings of cabinet and his own right, but he can attend if invited by the cabinet. So this is Minister of State. If we see the deputy ministers, a deputy minister is junior member of the Council of Minister and not given a independent charge of any department. So he is put under the charge of either Minister of Cabinet rank or that of the Minister of State, so that he gets proper training. So he does not attend a cabinet meeting. So sometimes Minister of State may attend the cabinet meeting if he has invitation. So if we see the powers of Council of Ministers, the executive powers are exercises all the powers by the President of India. He is exercises by these Council of Ministers, because the Council of Ministers exercises all the powers of the President of India. So if we see any government order, any legislature act, proposal or government order passed by the Parliament in the name of President of India. So the cabinet develops the policies, and also that will be presented in the Parliament for approval. It obtains parliamentary approval for these measures and then implements them. So all government departments are coordinated and controlled by the cabinet or prime minister. So here the cabinet is in charge of formulating foreign policy as well as all domestic policies deemed important for the country's overall development. Includes agriculture policies, industrial policies, all other foreign policies, and also in various sectors, financial or education sector, etc. So here the Council of Ministers is collectively responsible to the Lok Sabha for all its policies and decisions. So any failure on any front could lead to the ministry's demise. So if we see the emergency power, the president always acts on the recommendations of the prime minister and his council of ministers when he exercises emergency powers. As we discussed, president is having three types of emergency powers according to the Constitution of India. One is national emergency, Article 352. Another one is President's Rule, Article 356, and financial emergency, Article 360. So only with the cabinet's approval may the president declare an emergency. In accordance with the prime minister's and his council of ministers advice, he takes all necessary steps to address the emergency. So this is the emergency power actual implementation by the council of ministers. So if we see the legislative powers of council of ministers, despite the fact that the union legislature powers are in the hands of the parliament, so the council of ministers plays an essential role in the legislative process. So ministers are members of the parliament, as we discussed, as well as heads of the government ministries. So they participate fully and actively in the legislature process. So they are the ones who introduce and pilot the majority of the bills. The parliament spends 95% of its time dealing with governmental business, which is overseen by ministers. So because the ministry has the backing of the majority of parliament, so a measure that is not backed by the council of ministers cannot pass. So if we pass the bill, the parliament needs a majority. So so the original government has its own majority. That's what there is no failure in passing these legislature bills. So if the Lok Sabha passes a bill that the council of ministers does not support or rejects a bill that the council of ministers supports or rejects the cabinet's budget, it is considered a vote of no confidence in the government. So the situation not yet arrived in these recent times, but at the whole council of ministers is responsible for this parliament. So that's what they are following collective responsibility formula. So while doing so, the prime minister or cabinet might recommend to the president that the Lok Sabha be dissolved. So if we see the principle of this collective responsibility, the basic principle of parliamentary or cabinet form of government on the principle of collective responsibility. So here our ministry is there na collective cabinet responsibility refers to be to the accepted conduct of government of ministers as the part of the cabinet. So in England, because we adopted this collective responsibility principle from the British Constitution. In England, it works on well-established conventions. In India, this principle is ensured by making specific provisions in the Constitution. So here in our Constitution, Article 75, subclass 3 states that the Council of Ministers collectively responsible to the House of the People. So here the principle is about confidence of the House. So a government can remain in office for so long as it retains the confidence of the House of the People. Confidence which can be assumed unless and until proven otherwise a confidence vote. So if any minister disagrees, resign or with a cabinet decision, it is not prepared to be defended, he must resign. So in 1953, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar resigned due to disagreements with his colleagues over the Hindu Code Bill. So, due to his objection to the Muslim Women Protection of Rights and Divorce Act of 1986, Arif Muhammad also resigned. Uh, so, this is two examples for this collective responsibility principle. And also, the basic idea behind the principle of collective responsibility is to provide unity and homogeneity to the cabinet so that the functioning of government is not retarded. So, if we see, there will be individual responsibility also there. Though the ministers are collectively responsible to the Lok Sabha, they shall be individually responsible to the head of the state, that is the President of India. So here Article 75 subclass 2 declares that ministers shall be liable to be removed by the President in any time. So however, the President has to act on the advice of the Prime Minister. In practice, this power is exercised by the Prime Minister. So the Prime Minister asked the minister to resign. So there is no legal responsibility. If we see the position of these Council of Ministers in the Indian political system, the Council of Ministers has a significant and central role as the real and powerful executive. So the Council of Ministers really exercises all the powers of the President of India. So the cabinet is the most powerful entity of Council of Ministers. So these all these powers are exercised by the central institution. So the cabinet is in charge of directing, supervising, and controlling the creation of national policies as well as the administration operations. So, as the makers of all policies, the director of administration and the supreme coordinator of government activity, the cabinet enjoys an enviable position. So, it is indeed the steering wheel of the ship of the state. So, it is the center of power and the most powerful institution of the Indian political system. So, sometimes there are judgments also related to these Council of Ministers. In sometimes the Supreme Court upheld the oath of a valid and stated that describing a person of as deputy PM is descriptive only, and such a description does not confer on him any powers of prime minister. So sometimes Supreme Court ruled that the description of this a minister of deputy prime ministers or any other type of minister, such a minister of state or deputy minister, of which there is no mention in the constitution, so does not oath taken by him, so long as the substantive part of the oath is correct. So some issues also there regarding this Council of Ministers selection and their powers. So if we see, as we discussed, if we see the salaries are for these cabinet ministers, so the constitution declares that the salaries and allowances of ministers shall be determined by the parliament from the time to time. So each minister shall receive the same salary and allowances which are being paid to a member of parliament. So so these three types of ministers are there. And also, if we see the definition of cabinet, the cabinet is the core of the Council of Ministers. It consists of 15 to 20 members who are the senior most and in fact most effective ministers of the Council of Ministers. So the Prime Minister along with the cabinet ministers deliberate and decide various policies of national importance, and also the cabinet ministers hold the key portfolios as we discussed: home affairs, defense, external affairs, atomic energy, petroleum, finance, etc. as the cabinet ministers jointly form the central decision-making authority of the nation. The prime minister selects them and with much care. The meetings of the cabinet under the chairmanship of the prime minister are held once in a week, and in the case of necessity, more than once in a week, and even in a day. So, cabinet was inserted in the Article 352 of the Constitution by the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1978. So, it did not find a place in the original text of the Constitution. So, it is the cabinet and the not council of ministers who advises the president. So if we see the advantages of this cabinet, it is easier to build consensus, more effective discussion and efficient time utilization, less burden on public exchequer, economic efficiency, and more priority to secrecy, more rational division of work. If you see, large size of council of ministers ties up too many tongues and less viewpoint is available. So if we see the role of the cabinet is the highest decision making authority in Indian political and administrative system. So cabinet envisages as chief chief policy formulating body of the central government. So it is the supreme executive authority also, and he is the chief coordinator of the central administration, and also it is an advisory body to the president of India, and its advice is binding on him. So president can return advice for reconsideration only at once. So cabinet is the crisis manager, chief crisis manager, and thus deals with all exigencies. So it deals with all major legislative and financial matters. So cabinet exercises control over higher authorities like constitutional authorities and senior secretariat administrators, and also cabinet deals with the all foreign policies and foreign affairs. So there will be kitchen cabinet also there. Kitchen cabinet means every prime minister in India has its own inner cabinet, a circle within a circle. So during the era of Indira Gandhi, the inner cabinet, which came to be called as the kitchen cabinet, was particularly powerful because kitchen cabinet consists of an informal body of the prime minister and 2 to 4 influential colleagues in whom he has faith and with he can discuss every problem. So not only cabinet ministers, but also outsiders like friends and family members of the prime minister can include in this kitchen cabinet. So members of the kitchen cabinet advise the prime minister on important political and administrative issues and assist him in making crucial decisions. So here the kitchen cabinet is the informal and non-constitutional body, extra constitutional, which means unlike cabinet of ministers which has the constitutional status, here kitchen cabinet there is no significant recognition by the constitution. So the philosophy of kitchen cabinet also exists in the USA and Britain, and also it is not unique to Indian political administrative system. So if we see the names of this kitchen cabinet, the kitchen cabinet in the period of Indira Gandhi and in the time of Rajiv Gandhi, Dehradun Brigade, in the time of Lal Bahadur Shastri, Grand Council of India. So the names are there for this kitchen cabinet. So if you see as part of our syllabus, so if you see the prime minister, so the prime minister, as we discussed, is he is the real head of the government. So he exercises its powers with the help of this council of ministers. So after the general elections, who has the majority? So president called them to form the government, and he elect a candidate, the leader leader of the majority party as prime minister. So the president of India appoints a person as the prime minister who is the either the leader of the one party which holds a majority of the seats in the Lok Sabha, or is a person who is able to win confidence in the Lok Sabha by gaining the support of other political parties. As we discussed, in case of any single party got full majority, so that party leader may become prime minister. If in case of any party has got a majority, so two or more parties can merge and form a coalition government. So at that time, that parties has to be discussed to declare his coalition government's leader. So at that time, the president of India has his discretion power to appoint as prime minister. So all other ministers also appointed by the president on the advice of the prime minister. So if we see the powers and functions of the prime minister of India serves the country. He has several functions. He performs his functions taking responsibilities like he is the leader of country. The prime minister of India is head of the government of India, and also he has the power to allocate portfolios to his colleagues. As we discussed, there are three different categories of ministers are there. So the the prime minister has the authority to assign portfolios to the ministers. So formally, he is the chairman of the cabinet. The prime minister is the chairman of the cabinet and presides the meetings of the cabinet. He can impose his decision if there is a crucial opinion of difference among the members. So, and also official representative of the country, prime minister represents the country for high level international meetings. So, and also the link between president and the cabinet, because the prime minister acts as the link between president of India and cabinet. He communicates all decisions made by the cabinet and council of ministers to the president, which is related to the administration of the affairs of the union and proposals of legislation. So, and also prime minister is the head of nuclear command authority, and also Niti Aayog, appointments committee of the cabinet, department of atomic energy, department of space, and ministry of personal public grievances and pensions. So, and also he acts as chief advisor to the president of India. So if we see the eligibility of prime minister of India, to become an Indian prime minister, one has to be a citizen of India, a member of either Rajya Sabha or Lok Sabha. He should completed his 30 years if he is member of Rajya Sabha, or can be 25 years in case of he is member of Lok Sabha. So as we discussed, those who are having majority in the Lok Sabha at that party's leader can eligible to be a prime minister. So if we see the position of a prime minister, right from the days from the first prime minister Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, the prime minister is treated at much higher pedestal. So his prominence rests on his commanding position in the cabinet, and also he is the leader of majority party. So all these positions of power, when combined in one person, make him rank much above an ordinary minister. So so the relationship between the prime minister and the president of India, there are few articles of Indian constitution deal with this relationship between prime minister and the president. So the articles are article 74, 75 and 78. So 74 says that the prime minister and the president are both connected with the council of ministers. So the council with prime minister as head advise president on various issues. According to article 75, president appoints prime minister and other ministers are appointed by the president on the advice of these prime ministers. So ministers hold their office during the pleasure of president. So here the Council of Ministers are collectively responsible to the Lok Sabha. So Article 78 mentions about Prime Minister communicates all decisions made by the Council of Members to the President. So President can also refer issues for the consideration of the Council of Ministers. So if we see these Prime Minister's role in Indian administration. So he is the chief of the union government. So as we discussed on the according to the Constitution of India, so these Council of Ministers and this Prime Minister is plays a key role in the policy formulation and policy implementation to the entire nation. So if you see, the Prime Minister is the keystone of the cabinet arc. So as in England, Prime Minister is the keystone of cabinet arc. Here in India also, at the head of the Council of Ministers, he will act as keystone of the cabinet arc. So even though any particular minister has tendered any advice to the president, without placing it before the Council of Ministers, the president has through the Prime Minister the power to refer the matter to be considered by the Council of Ministers. So the unity of cabinet system will thus be enforced in India through the provisions of the written constitution. So if we see the relationship between President and Council of Ministers in parliamentary form of government, the tenure of office of the virtual executive is dependent on the will of the legislature. So is the in our parliamentary system also a body formed by the members of legislature and responsible to the popular house of the legislature for their office and their actions. So while the so-called cabinet in the American president is responsible to himself and does not Congress, but here Council of Ministers of Indian president shall be responsible to the parliament. So that is the difference between Indian parliamentary system and American parliamentary system. So as we discussed, Prime Minister is the head of the government and real executive of Indian system. So according to the constitution, this president has the power to appoint the prime minister. So the PM occupies his post during the pleasure of the president. He can't be removed till he commands a majority in the house. So as per the government of India, rules created by the president, different departments were created to handle government's business. Ministers and subject to distribution was done to each ministry by the president on the advice of the prime minister. So if we see the powers of the prime minister, as we discussed, he is the head of the council of ministers and he recommends people to be appointed as ministers to the president. So he allocates and reshuffles portfolios amongst them. He can ask the minister to resign or tell the president to dismiss him. So he supervises activities of all ministers. His resignation or death leads to dissolution of the council of ministers. So if he resigns to his position, then the government will collapse. So at that time, there is no powers to the council of ministers and parliament. So, and also he communicates to the presidents all the matters relating to the administration of the union government and proposed legislations made by this council of ministers. And also he furnishes information required by the president relating to administration of the union and proposed legislations. So he submits the consideration of the council of ministers in any matter on which decision has been taken by the individual minister, but the council of ministers hasn't considered it. And also, he is the leader of the lower house, and also he can advise to the president to summon or prorogue the House of Sessions. He can advise the dissolution of Lok Sabha to the president at any time. He announces government policies on the floor of the House, and also he is advisor of president regarding appointments to various regulators and constitutional bodies of the union government. He heads the National Development Council, National Integration Council, National Interstate Council, Niti Aayog, National Water Resource Council. As we discussed, he has the more powers than President of India. But in the name of president only, the Council of Ministers and president will act and implement their laws. So this is the role of prime minister and his powers. So and also we are having this so if you have any doubts regarding prime minister or council of ministers, you may ask.
Sir, what is legislature?
Legislature means the body of the parliament who makes the laws or the government orders. So
Okay.
that's what we called legislature. In that legislature, our elected members and council of ministers will be act as members. So if they wants to pass the resolution, so they have to be present their proposal in the house and should be accepted with the majority of the house. And then only that act or proposal will be sent to the president for the final approval. Then only that task will called as government order or act.
Means that article or something that which is given by the member, that is called as legislature.
Yes.
Sir, cabinet ministers can have any qualification other than ministers?
No. As we discussed, he should be a member of parliament, and he is in either Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. That is the primary eligible to become a minister. And also, the most of the times, only those who are having majority in the house of a single party or coalition parties, at that party members only will be elected as minister.
Any particular count is there for cabinet ministers?
As we discussed, only 15 to 20 members are there for the cabinet ministers. For whole ministers or whole council of ministers, as we discussed, according to the 91st Constitutional Amendment Act, only 15%, maximum 15% of the total members of Parliament, Lok Sabha, which means here we are having 545 total number of members are there. So apart from this 545, 15% is the maximum members of the Council of Ministers. So 50 plus 40, around 90 members, maximum 90 members will be the maximum number of Council of Ministers. Yes, if will government collapse if PM resigns, will collapse government.
Means total 90 ministers will be there in a Lok Sabha.
Not exactly 90, just 15% of our 545 members. So what will be the original number?
Okay, it is. It's not having a particular count, but it will be a 50 to 90.
15% maximum. 15% of total number of Lok Sabha.
15% of total member of Lok Sabha.
Lok Sabha, yes. If you see roughly
Now
545 into 15 divided by 100. Around 100.
okay.
Mm.
Can you please tell us how many ministers are there now?
Now,
Now,
presently,
yes.
we have to check it exactly now. What is the number? Present union. At present time, here we are having a so there are 58 union ministers and 93 departments in India. Also, there are total
90 departments.
93 departments are there.
Okay. It is in our history, or it is an act, or it is there for nowadays?
I can't get what is the question exactly.
Actually, what I am
not history. It is determined by the Constitution of India. That is the maximum number of ministers should not exceed 15% of the Lok Sabha. So this is the primary principle to appoint ministers. So the government or prime minister has to bond for this principle.
Okay.
So he may allocate portfolios, or he may select ministers from his own party, but it should not exceed this principle of 15% of the total number of Lok Sabha.
Okay.
So if we see, there are at 2022 count, there are 31 cabinet ministers are there, 2 ministers of state, and 47 ministers of state are there. So 31, 33. So 90 ministers are there at the time of 31st May of 2022.
Okay.
Thank
you.
Okay. Is there any doubts?
No, sir.
Thirty-eight cabinet ministers.
47 state.
47.
Are you repeating? 31 cabinet ministers, 2 ministers of state.
Sir,
So
can I
here
explain president and parliament?
In last class, we have discussed about president, na?
Ninth lesson, sir.
Ninth lesson is Prime Minister and Council of Ministers, na? Unit 8 is President.
Parliament, sir.
7th one is? What is 7th chapter?
Lok Sabha and
Parliament, sir.
Union Legislature. Parliament composition.
Parliament composition, powers and functions.
Yes. Did we
So,
have discussed this?
yes.
Sure. One request is there. By the end of this all classes, can you please tell us like somewhat summary type of all lessons?
Okay, sure, definitely. In last class, we will summarize our syllabus, entire
Yeah.
syllabus.
Before that, we will complete our all syllabus, so we can do this in last classes.
Sure, sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Sir, when we are having third sem?
Exams.
Yes.
So after finishing this online classes, there will be schedule will released by the university authorities.
Okay. Can you please tell us like when it will be in Feb or March?
Any place, sir?
I cannot tell you that, but you must follow our university website for updates.
Okay.
Or contact with your study center, so they will have information.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, please visit please visit our website for updates regarding any exams or examination fees, schedules, everything. Okay, thank you for your participation. So tomorrow same time we are having class.
Okay.
Please attend.
Okay, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.